have to plan your work and then work your plan, right? You plan to fail if you fail to plan. So I plan everything.
Hey, welcome to another edition of the Journey to Freedom, where we talk to, at least here in 2024, we are interviewing 100 Black men who are doing some amazing things in their communities, who are making sure that they're working with, I guess what I would say is we found a way to serve. And I say this often, I start my day off with a prayer that says, "Dear Lord, give me the wisdom to do the things you would have me do in a way that serves you and pleases others." And so when we think about our journey to freedom and we think about the shoulders, and this has become a phrase that we use a lot, but the giants of folks that we have now been able to learn from, to grow from, be able to create things in our lives that mean so much more to us as we try to figure out what we're going to do to grow, when we figure out how we're going to trust other folks. There was a time when it was really hard to trust people. When we think about in today's guest, you will hear some of his story and what he's been able to accomplish over these decades. Because if we think about the last, 50 to 75 years in our country, if we go back into even further, then we're talking about like slavery and segregation and, a lot of those things. Well, our last 50 years, 75 years, we've had to go through a ton of stuff just in order as men to be able to move forward. You think of the systemic things in our society that were designed to break our families apart. If you think about the 20s and 30s and 40s, where Black families were doing tremendously well, we were in our schools, we were learning a whole lot of stuff. And then we figured out, or I would say our country figured out ways to try to separate us and try to make sure that even when you think about the phenomenal Brown versus the Board of Education and being able to say, okay, we're going to integrate schools. Well, imagine, I try to imagine sometimes what it would have been like to be one or two Black children in an all-white school, where then I had teachers who didn't believe that I was even smart enough to be able to achieve. And then we fast forward into, we have the project housing portion of the late 60s and the early 70s, and just, us trying to figure out our culture. And so I'm so excited to have you here today. I'm excited to have this conversation and talk about somebody who has done many things, not just, and I'm going to let him talk about his, and thank you for your service and to his military background. But then the other things that he's been able to do in order to improve the lives of Black families over the last 30, 40 years. And so, James, as I say to all my other guests, I can't wait to hear your story. I can't, as we were talking before, I try not to, and for those of you, I get to talk to our guests beforehand, and I try not to ask them a lot of questions, because then they answer all the questions and we don't get it on video. And so we don't get it on the podcast. And I just listened to one that he had done and said, hey, I want to capture all of this. And so thank you again for being on. Start your story wherever you want, whether you want to start when you were a little kid or start exploring the middle. Hey. But can't wait to hear your story, and then we'll just kind of go back and forth after you do that. So again.
Well, thank you for having me. I always enjoy the chance to talk, especially
I love
it. Some of the issues plaguing the Black community. I'm from Staten Island, New York. I grew up in the projects in a place called Manners Harbor. It was horrible. I couldn't even go out to play. Back in those days, heroin was a big thing. There was needles everywhere on the basketball court, so on and so forth. So I was restricted on how much I could go out. But my parents thought enough about education. My grandfather was a Tuskegee Airman. So as you can imagine, education and Black awareness was central to my being, as well as the Black church. So my grandmother was friends with a maid of the Diamonds. The Diamonds owned the Staten Island Advance, a paper in New York. So they helped me get into a private school where I was the only Black person there for a very long time. So I went from pre-K to 12th grade in the same school. We just changed buildings. Of course, I was bullied. They threw my food on the floor every now and then, fights, so on and so forth. But I tried not to bring any of that home, and I kept it within, right? So after graduating high school, I went to Howard University, which was a totally different environment, all Black college. I studied engineering, then I went to the School of Business. I missed Kamala and Puff Daddy and all of those people by a few years. And after that, I went back to New York and tried to get a job, couldn't get a job. I ran around the streets for a while. I did the thing that most inner city kids did. And, I looked up one day and I said, something's got to change. So I went into the Army. I'm an Army vet. I did 25 and a half years in 4 days. I've been to 49 countries during my travels. I went to war 3 or 4 times, Afghanistan, Iraq, and I did the Operation Tamagotchi, where the Fukushima nuclear power plant went critical. When they had to put the country back together, to speak. And then while I was in the Army, and I got to do some community outreach and liaise with that were on the same vein or had some intelligence. When I say intelligence, had some college background or, had some structure to their life, right? Some institutionalization, right? So from that point, I met a very intelligent Black female who was a counselor at Central Texas College. And she kind of inspired me to get an education because I was kind of done with education. Since that time, and since talking to her and having a good mentor, and I think that's what a lot of our people are missing, either male or female, right? I would say females because females are more educated than Black males for some reason. Because of that, I ended up with 7 college degrees, a master's, a bachelor's, and a few associates. I was even on TV in Hawaii, a cooking show, because when I got out, I was an IT guy. I have an MIS, a Master Information Systems. So during my time in the military, I was going to buy a house. And a friend of mine, a Mexican friend of mine, said, why would you buy a house? Buy a duplex. You can start your own real estate business. Okay, very good point. So I did that. So I have a real estate business. I've had 3 businesses abroad, 1 in Sosua. And then I also have a trucking business. I started with some friends in Texas as well. I'm starting an apartment building, buying or commercial real estate business with 4 friends of mine. And I also established a non-emergency medical transportation business with my spouse. I've been married 15 years, and it's been an experience. It's been a ride. So I retired here in Charlotte, North Carolina, after living overseas for probably 15 years, if you include Hawaii. And I'm just happy to be back in the States.
That is so cool. So part of your story, you talked about your dad was a Tuskegee Airman.
My grandfather. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how did that kind of shape your identity compared to maybe some of the other kids in the neighborhoods that you are? Was that something where you got to spend time with your grandpa? What was that like?
So actually, I spent time with him than any other male in my life, excluding my father, right? He invented something called the turnbuckle jig, and he was always working on projects. He emphasized math and reading, and I was always hear his stories about how he was discriminated when he was in the military. He said they weren't given guns, they were given sticks, and they would always change the timelines, and they always had some kind of conflict with their Caucasian counterparts. So I remember one time I came in, I said, you know what, I'm tired of going to school. I'm done with school, right? And I said, I'm not going back after this summer. He says, summer's when you rest, but education is something that nobody could ever take from you. So that when I was younger, I didn't really hear him. Your parents force you to do certain things. And then when you get older, you learn why you were, forced to do those things. But I value education, and I love to learn.
So when you talk about education, so you took education seriously when you started really liking it, because all your degrees, all your masters, what do you think made you love education and want to continue to get more? What was it about it? Was it the results that you could get afterwards, or was just the sheer learning?
So I'm going to say sheer learning
process,
but a sense of self-esteem, pride. When you get that A back on your paper, like, man, I really know what I'm talking about. Nobody could ever call me stupid again, right? So basically, I think it was the self-esteem.
Okay, gotcha. And so when we think about self-esteem, one of our themes is identity, and our identity is shaped a lot by, you even alluded to it earlier, about the people that you hang around with and the people that you stay with. And you talked about the project housing that you grew up in, and I'm assuming that a lot of the kids that you grew up with didn't make it out the way you did. What can you attribute you getting out and changing your life in the way you did, and the other kids not being able to do that same thing?
So you have to change your environment, right? A lot of people don't see opportunity. And again, when opportunity arises, you have to take it, right? My father always said, you can't steal second with your foot on first. So you have to get outside your comfort zone sometime, right? Because most of the people that I grew up with, they go home, they go to church, they go to work, right? Either they're not around, they got, killed in the street somewhere, moved away, or they're just aging in place. So a lot of us, I remember I went to a church service in Augusta, Georgia, and the reverend, he would speak out of the Bible, but he would talk about real experiences too. And I kind of related to some of the stuff he said. The problem with our people is we live our life like we have 1,000 years to live it, right? And we major in minor things and minor in major things. And if you don't know what I'm talking about we're more worried on our back than our cash in our bank account. So we change our way of thinking and our mindset. And it takes getting out of that environment that supports negative thinking and negative actions to somewhere where you can grow and expand and you have unlimited growth. In the military, you're only restricted by your own actions. So if you want to get promoted, you go in there, you get physically fit, you learn your general orders, you pass your boards and stuff, and then you go from there. But a lot of people don't have that opportunity. They get stuck in a rut because around the hood speak, you don't have those big corporations and everything that you can go in and, hey, hire me, right? And you don't see other Black faces that will support you in what you're doing or give you any kind of mentorship.
Yeah. Gotcha. Can you attribute a lot of your different mentors you've had? And then, and if so, how did you find the mentors? Did they find you and you were listen, or did you go out and seek mentors?
That's a very good question, right? And I'm going to say it's a combination of both, right? I grew up in a situation with my grandfather and father, and I have an uncle. He's here now, and I'm telling you, he's done everything: pharmacist, real estate, restaurants, all that kind of stuff. So he's been my mentor, and he's still my mentor today, since birth, basically. And my grandfather's always been there, and that's kind of where the math and science came from his area. And then I just went out and sought mentorship. Friends in the NAACP, where we have these poignant conversations. I'm in the National Association of Minority Contractors. I just came back from Atlanta at a conference, and it blew me away how many brothers and sisters have actually excelled to make millions, if not billions of dollars, and they're willing to pass that information on, right? Mm-hmm. So if I never went and sought out NAACP and the Black Chamber of Commerce in Texas and in Charlotte and or the Rotary Club, right? Because I'm in a bunch of different organizations, I would have never had these contacts, never had those insightful conversations, and never got the food I needed or the sustenance I needed to move forward. I volunteer at the VA also. That's kind of my way of giving back. And some of those veterans have great stories.
So when you think about, like, you a little bit about organizations that are predominantly Black organizations or Black-led organizations, which kind of leads to the things that you're part of. How important was it to see people who look like you, interact with people who look like you, some of the same community, in order to help create your success? Being able to see folks in positions that look like you, was that helpful, or was it just the way it was?
It's very helpful to know that you're not limited to your space where you've been confined to, right? However, I will say it's good to be in organizations of color, but it's also important to be in other organizations, right? Because whether we like it or not, we don't control our own dynamics, right? When I say that, I'm talking about the world at large, the United States at large, politics, whatever. So it's important that we get or be well-rounded, right?
Yeah.
So I have friends from all walks of life that, contribute knowledge or some kind of tips to success or something like that. If that's clear, if that made sense.
Absolutely. When I think so, as an identity, and we're thinking about, the person that we need to become. Was that ever? Did you ever think that you needed to be a certain person before you could achieve something, or you just knew you could already achieve it, and it would just fall into place? Or were there certain things or certain questions or things you asked, like, I know you're, in engineering and the maths and sciences. Well, if you don't have that educational background to be able to do some of the calculations and the computing, then you can't really succeed at that area. And if there's people that are holding you back or not allowing you in spaces to be able to move forward, how did you fight through that process?
So, there's a few sayings I live by, and I keep all these quotes, and this is something that hopefully is propelling me forward. Right? Never lie to anybody, and you never be never be disappointed. Right? And that's what I'm looking for. You have to plan your work and then work your plan. Right? You plan to fail if you fail to plan. So I plan everything. Right? My wife says I have OCD, and I'm always planning everything, and that's how I think you get successful. There was a DJ in New York on a radio station, and he always ended his broadcast. I was a BLS or Kiss FM, I don't remember. He said, "If you shoot for the moon and you miss, you're still amongst the stars." So propel yourself forward, and where you end up, you end up. However, on the other side, I tell people that like it goes back to the "I got 1,000 years to live" thing, right? Don't overanalyze things, right? A lot of people suffer from analysis paralysis. They analyze things. Oh, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. I gotta do anything, right? By the time you look up, your life's over. So make your plans, stick to them, and go forward. And wherever they land you, right? Even if it's not to the extent where you want, it'll still get you in the right direction. And it's better to make a wrong decision, right? When I say wrong decision in planning or whatever, right? No decision, right? Failure is a prerequisite to success.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. One of the things that I think Black men, tend to fall into the trap of is they don't believe they're enough, like that they can succeed and they can do the things that others are doing. We get pigeonholed into this thing like athletics, or so we almost not, I don't want to say worship, we idolize some of the athletes for the things they're doing, or we think about entertainment. So we idolize some of the actors and the singers and the people who entertain us. But beyond that, when I think of like sciences and the maths and the some of the physics, some of the harder subjects that many don't ever indulge in, there's a belief system that we can't. How do we overcome that belief system that says you're not enough, and you don't have anybody telling you you're enough? So many kids that don't have dads or moms that have the time to spend that time saying you're the greatest and you're enough. How do we overcome those things?
So every day you have to challenge yourself, right?
Okay.
Every day you have to read something, learn something, do something that you've never done before. And once you do that, you'll learn, hey, this is not that hard. I should have been doing this all along, right? I can overcome any obstacle with persistence. For instance, before I joined the Army, I was, running amok. I was overweight. I don't think I ran a mile. I probably couldn't even run my mouth, right? And at one point I was running 10 miles, 5 miles, 7 miles, but it took some time to build up to that, right? And as Black men or Black people, we have such a negative view of ourselves from slavery, right? I.e. the Willie Lynch papers, right? That's been going on. That mental impression or stigma has been following us 400 years, or whenever those papers were introduced into the slave society to keep us controlled, right? We have a general lack of trust for each other, and I think that stops us from moving forward. with that crabs in the barrel mentality, right? Once we start trusting each other and working together, the sky's the limit. And we also, and I told my son this, you might be a great basketball player, right? You might could rap a few bars, but very few people attain success in those areas. So you always have to have a backup plan. Don't want to stop you from doing your dreams. Go for them, but always have a backup plan. And if you are going to have dreams, right, you have to put some action to them because dreams without actions are fantasies. And we don't fantasize. We make things come to reality.
How do we, you brought up trust. How do we begin, do we just give people the benefit of the doubt first, or we just, and then when they fail to live up to what our expectation was, then we stop trusting them? Do we just don't trust anybody and then burn it? You point on.
So trust should be earned, right? I don't really give trust freely, but I will extend the olive branch to you and you know, how I got to where I'm at, or educate you where I'm at, and because I have somebody doing the same for me, right? So if you start, for instance, I have a young man that I'm mentoring now, right? And I met him when I was volunteering at the, right?
Yeah.
So now he's been retired for years, right? Before me, right?
Okay.
And he didn't take the time to look through the VA handbook. So he didn't know that he could get his student loans released. He didn't know how to buy a house, one, but that there was a tax abatement available, right? In Texas, 100% disabled veterans don't have to pay any real estate tax. He didn't know any of this. So I had to sit him down, right? I didn't bring him to my house until, we conversations outside of my living space and explain to him how things work, taught him a little bit about investment, and he was like, wow, I didn't know this. So he's like, hey, man, I want you to take me under your wing and learn all this stuff. And I enjoy the conversations I've had with him. I've had him over the house just last weekend. And we talked for hours. We watched the football game. So I integrated stuff he knew with stuff he didn't know. And I do that. I have a few people that I do that for. I'll reach out to you, but if you don't reach back, then I'm not going to waste my time.
Gotcha.
What was that movie, Malcolm X?
Yes.
They told him, he said, hey, if you take one step towards Allah, he takes two steps towards you. All right.
Yes.
Not that I'm Muslim, but that's a very good way to look at it.
Yeah, it really is. A very good principle to live by. When somebody doesn't believe that they can do it, and you're mentoring people, how do you help them start getting that process of, is it a slow process? I mean, what that takes them from, hey, I don't believe self, that self-esteem about, to them believing yourself? Do they need the military? Do they need, what kind of external stimulus do they need? And then how do they change that internally, intrinsically? How do they begin to have thought process that I can do this, or I am good enough?
Okay. A very good question. So you have to listen to your inner voice, and you have to change the setting and the volume, right? Because there's some kids walking around the street, I guess now, that probably have that voice in their head, hey, I'm not going to be nothing, so I'm going to go out here and sell drugs, rob somebody, whatever. And I had that voice for a while, right?
Okay.
Once you get around different people that support your ideas, right? I think the art of conversation is dying, right? One, because we don't talk to each other, right? If we do, we're talking about the wrong subjects, right? And two, we have, I don't know if I said two or not already, but the internet and information systems, we don't have face-to-face interactions really anymore, right? Everything like meetings, a lot of Zoom meetings, stuff like that. You don't have that face-to-face interaction, Facebook, so on and so forth. But getting back to the original question, you have to, if you're mentoring somebody or you're in close proximity with somebody, right? Compliment them, right? Even when they don't deserve it, support them. It's very hard to get support in the Black community. I hate to say that. I will say that there's support mechanisms in the community that a lot of people overlook. The Black church. When I was growing up, the Black church was the pillar of the Black community. Not so much now, right? So you have to have people around you or surround yourself with positive people. It really doesn't matter too much where you're at. It's who you're around. If you're around positive people, and I try to surround myself with positive people, other business people, like I told you, that NAACP conference, the National Association of Minority Contracting, not only did they teach you about business principles, I'm not doing a commercial for them or anything, but we had a social night at Cam Newton's Cigar Bar, right? And to sit and talk to these guys that have been doing. I recently got my DBE certification. That's Disadvantaged Business Enterprise for my trucking business to do business with the government. And the people, we got a few other certifications, but the people there were showing us how to utilize the DBE. They were talking to us, and then not just African Americans. There was some Hispanic people there too. There's two Mexican gentlemen who are presidents of NAACP in Houston, I believe. And man, they were just dropping all kind of knowledge on us, right? In a social setting. And it was very good to be around people, suit and ties. We were all dressed up. And I think that also changed your perspective, how you dress, how you talk, what you eat, your health, so on and so forth. It's a whole plethora of things that you need to indulge in to change your whole outlook, even your vernacular, even the way you talk, right? If you use a word that most people don't understand, they think you are trying to one up them or prove your intelligence or whatever. But I just think that it's a whole myriad of things.
How big do you think about relationships that you have in your life and the people, whether it's a spouse, kids, people that you mentor? How big of a deal is it to make sure that you have relationships, and what do you need to do to contribute to those relationships?
So here's the thing. I'm sorry. So here's the general overarching concept of relationships. All relationships require compromise, right? It's not going to be your way all the time. It's not going to be my way. We have to meet somewhere in the middle, right? And you have to do things to support your relationship with whoever it is on a regular basis. I'm not saying every day, but every now and then, right? I have people that I haven't seen for a while. I'll pick up the phone when I have nothing to do, which is very rare, and say, "Hey, man, what's going on? How you feeling?" "Oh, I'm doing good." And then if you're sick, what? Well, check in with me. I have a friend right now. I brought him into the Rotary Club, right? And was an officer in the Army, Fulbright Colonel, Army Corps of Engineers, everything, right?
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, he wrote 4 books, right? You might want to have him on the podcast. Very intelligent guy.
Okay.
So he got sick. He had some surgery, and then once he told us about it, I was like, "What?" So I went to visit him in the hospital. Made him laugh, cracked a few jokes every day. Matter of fact, we just talked today, right? And I think that helps his recovery. He was actually complaining about some people not coming to see him while he was in the hospital. People that he thought were close or friends, yes. And I just met him maybe, 6 months ago, 5 months ago, because he came into the VA maybe. Okay. And we just hit it off. I sponsor him for the Rotary Club, the Black Chamber of Commerce, and we have very insightful conversations, just like the conversation me and you are having. We had a very good conversation the other day about Black male and Black female relationships. Very deep conversation. We talked for 5 hours.
Wow. Wow. Okay. And I guess what are some of your takeaways from it? If you have 5 hours of conversation, they must be giving you some insight of things that you might not have known about or you wanted to know more about. What are some of your takeaways from that conversation?
So you can do a whole nother series on that conversation, right?
Oh, really? Okay.
But I will say, in short, there is short-sightedness on both sides, male and female. We were talking about the fact that Black females, right? And I love Black females. I'm not trying to disparage anybody. You hear a lot of them say, "I don't need a man," right? We're the only race of people where the women say that, right? You hear things like Black men are no good, whatever. And this also plays into the Black male psyche of inferiority, right?
Yeah.
And then we talked about Black men going overseas or marrying different races. Why? What are the root causes? And where the problem lies, and it's in communication. We were talking to, and actually we had a couple females joining the conversation. I also had the same conversation at the NAACP convention,
Oh, really?
sitting watching the game. Oh man, that was another heated conversation. But you can start. That's a conversation starter. If
Mm-hmm.
you are in proximity to a black female, because some people's emotions get involved in the conversation, they'll get combative, right? And that's males or females, but usually a male and a female or a group
Yeah.
get in the conversation. It's a long conversation, and there's a lot of energy in it, and passions fly. That's basically what I can give you from
Yes.
all that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about your health and keeping your body, and I know the military probably taught you some things that give some diets or some things that will keep you healthy. And the average black man in this country lives to be about 72. What are some things that you've done or are doing to stay healthy physically? And then beyond that, what are some things that you're doing that will keep you healthy mental health wise? Because we find so much of the decline in mental health in black men as a result of, I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Okay, great. So, tell you this: growing up, my father thought that taking care of his health was taking some Robitussin night or pot liquor. Pot liquor is the water you off the collard greens when you cook it, right? He thought that could cure anything,
Yeah.
right? Never went to the doctor until it was too late, right? If I sneeze, whoop, I'm at the doctor because my medical stuff's free, right? So I go to the doctor. Matter of fact, I hurt my knee in the gym, right? And I'm approaching 60, right? So I scheduled myself for X-ray, and the X-ray found nothing. I said, "Well, I need an MRI. Let's get that going." Right? I was watching Earthquake, a special comedy for Earthquake, the comedian, and he said when he got Obamacare, right, and every year on his birthday he goes to the doctor, and that's a present to himself. And he said he wanted, and it was funny. He said, "I want a cardiogram, a mammogram,
You want it all, huh?
half a gram." Right? Yeah, it was hilarious. So that is something that we don't do. The military changes your mindset about health because I never thought I could run. I never thought I could do all these push-ups, all that kind of stuff. So once I conquered that mental barrier of being, oh, I'm weak, I can't run, I can't do any of that stuff, whatever, and they show you how to do it, progress to a certain point, and then you have these food classes, right? Well, nutrition classes, right? That you can go to if you're overweight. And I think they give you one now when you come in. When I came in, it was a different world. And you learn what you put in your body can change your outlook on a lot of things, right? For instance, right? And this is an easy, quick way for people to look at the chemicals and stuff that are in certain foods, right? Even our vegetables don't have the vitamins and nutrients they have because they're grown so close together. They share the same nutrients that you'd have if they were apart, if that makes sense. But if you pick up a water bottle, right? And I can't remember where I got this. Okay, I think I took a class with the Marines. I was taking a computer class, and the guy had a smart water and an
So
apple.
pick up
That
the
was his
water like
breakfast.
this. Okay.
There
Okay.
you go, something like that. But it had a label on it, right? He said, you have to watch what you eat if you want to be in optimal condition. So what are you talking about? He said, this water bottle, for example, right? It was a Dasani. I can't remember the name of the water, and I don't want to disparage any water on any brands on your thing. But any bottle of water, you pick it up and you read the ingredients, it'll have magnesium sulfate, sodium bicarbonate, sodium chloride, all that kind of stuff. To me, it should just have the H, the 2, and the O, right? All that extra stuff, all those chemicals you put in your body, especially if it's a hot day, you're drinking, 8, 9 waters. You're like, man, why am I so dizzy? It's because of all the chemicals and stuff.
All the chemicals that are in water, not in food and other. You're talking about in water. They're putting chemicals in water.
In water, right?
Amazing. So, mental health. Kind of walk me through your process. I know as being a person who's has been in the armed services and stuff. They know, whether about PTSD or we're just talking about just general life trauma type stuff that can happen to us as kids. How do we overcome that as Black men? Because I think we hide from it a lot.
Right. So mental trauma is something that is should be a focus of conversation in the Black community, because all through your life you're told you're nobody, you're nothing, right? And you are a slave. So you have to put a brick wall around your thinking, right? And deflect some of that stuff. And then you have to change that inner voice, right? And say, hey man, who cares what they say? It's not important, blah blah blah. I'm gonna just do what I need to do. There's a physical health to that too, right? If you go gym and you ride the bike 5, 10 miles, whatever, right? It releases those endorphins, right? When you run, lift weights, whatever, it releases those endorphins, and it makes you feel happy, right? Happiness is something we're always seeking, but very few, I would say, Black men experience a lot of happiness in their life. I've seen a lot of sadness, right?
Yeah.
You know, people going to jail, people dying, getting shot, all that kind of stuff. And if you watch the news, it's very negative, right? We have a lot of negative, because bad news travels faster than good news, right? So you always have to play. You have to always play up your successes to yourself, right? I have a few things on my wall here. This is going to be one of my rentals, but when I was at my Army job, right, in my office, I had the wall covered with plaques and stuff and things that I have in my military time, Bronze Stars or whatever, right? And I do that so when those people come in my office, right, lieutenants or officers that might have had more education or better upbringing, right, and look down on me, you'll think twice, because you'll see all those accolades, right, that in your mind I shouldn't have, or I don't have. And then it also helps people from the same background say, oh, this guy did it. I love to see my name in writing, right, on a check or otherwise, right? So I think it helps you when you celebrate yourself.
Yeah. Let's put a little bit. I think our internet paused for a second, but we're okay. We're back, and let's pivot a little bit to finances and money, because some people will tell you that money's not important. I'll tell you it's up there with oxygen.
Right.
Not because of money itself is it's just a piece of paper, right? But it's what it represents. It's what it allows us to do. It's how it allows us to move through groups and society and the people that we hang out with. But we're not taught a lot about money growing up, and we're having to figure out ourselves. How did you get your financial education? And what are some things that you might have sought out and then things that just fell in your lap?
So I'm from New York City. Everybody from New York's a hustler, right? Money is something that you always see, right? Whether it's, the guy on the corner, selling drugs, whatever, nice car and all that. Man, why don't I have nice things, right?
Yeah.
And then when you get to a certain age, you realize that trying to get those nice things might put you in jail, and you might not be able to enjoy life. So you come up with alternate ways to get money, right? And I went to school, and I was going through some of these books and school of business, learning stuff. So I switched from a school of engineering to school of business when I was at Howard. And when I'm opening these books and reading about these multi-million-dollar companies and stuff like that, I started paying close attention to news when I was in the military, and came in my master's program. I lost you for a minute. You still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So in the master's program, you work in groups. So I had a very good Caucasian friend, and we were going out to dinner. We were in the same group. We were working on our computer assignment, right? And so we were going out to dinner, and one of his friends came out and said, "Hey, where you going? We got this investment group meeting." Whatever. They had a room in the college. So I go in there, and he was like, "Hey, can I bring my friend in there?" Right? So I was the only Black person in the room, basically. So when they were talking, I kept hearing this RIT word. What is a RIT? I'm like, is that a cracker? What is that? Right? Real estate investment trust. So one guy, he sat next to me, and so they had kind of like a, I guess, an AA meeting where somebody shares and everybody listens. And the guy said, "Yeah, I had a bad month. I made $20,000.
Ooh, okay.
Hey, that's a good month. What are you talking about? You got a great job, man. And I didn't know what he was talking about. I
Yes.
said, man, I'm in the wrong career, right? So he came and sat next to me, right, after he came to the mill, and I said, hey, man, you got a good job. What are you complaining about? He said, no, that's dividends. I said, whoa. So you made $20,000 last month in dividends? What are you talking about? So when he explained to me all kind of, like what the return on investment was, what the dividends were, when you got paid, a dollar cost average in compound, I said, wow, this is amazing, right? And I started to do it on my own. I had a group with my best friend. Me and him started a group when we were in Japan. We used to meet Dunkin' Donuts on Sunday and talk about money, right?
Really?
Again,
Wow.
the quality of conversations, networking, and
Mhm.
fellowships, right? Because we fed off each other's energy and we talked, right?
Yeah.
Hey man, you gonna meet me there? I'll be there. Okay, I looked at we were all excited, right? And when you get your first dollar that you don't have to work for, you're like, man, right? This is great, right? I don't have a job now.
Ooh. Well, you work for it. You just freelance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, the fact and then money, when you said some people say money is not everything, there's a saying, it's a damn close second though, right? So if you don't have any money, you can't go to the doctor, right? You can't even go on a date. You can't even spend a lovely evening, right? And when I was in New York and I was working, a bunch of jobs that were pretty good entry level jobs, but the cost of living was so high I couldn't afford anything, right? Guys in my
Yeah.
area used to call me the bartender, right? And you wonder
Okay.
why? It's because I had a car that was so cheap and such bad shape. I might could go a block and I had to pop the trunk at the red light and put all my fluids in and everything. Because
No.
if you live more than 2 blocks from me, I met a female and she lived, like a couple miles from me. Oh, I can't see you. My car's not gonna make it, right? So I say that, and I think about those times eating onion sandwiches, stuff like that. Um,
Ooh, onion sandwiches.
you never had an onion
Wow.
sandwich? See, that's how you knew
I've
you grew
never
up
had
in
an
the hood,
onion sandwich.
right? No
Peanut
pancakes.
butter sandwich, but not an onion sandwich.
Yeah, you take a
Ooh.
piece of Wonder Bread, put some syrup on it. Hey, you do what you gotta do. Government cheese. If I find a brick of government cheese now, I'll pay $1,000 for a block of
Ooh.
government cheese, right?
Yes.
Anyway, so once you get older and you could afford things that you couldn't afford before. Now, my mother and father did their thing, but that was a different time and a different era, right?
Yeah.
So when we got out of projects, probably at age 5, right? Well, we always, between two project communities, right?
Mhm.
And the avenue, mother won opportunity to bid on the house, right? It was like the total square footage of this house might have been 900 square feet up and
Oh, wow.
down, and we had a very small backyard, right?
Okay.
I slept in the bunk bed, right?
Mhm.
Me and my brother had bunk beds, and we got old enough. We put the bunk beds on the floor, and I slept on that twin mattress till it was time to go away to school or whatever, right? So, now where you can go to hotels and king size beds, I got 90-inch TVs in every room, right? I remember the TV. You remember the little TV? You had the dial on it. You put aluminum foil. We had 3
Yes.
channels, right? And we were grateful to have the
Yeah.
3
Yeah.
channels,
Yeah.
right? I tell people today, the kids today, right? You are so lucky. We didn't have the internet and cell phones, microwaves, VCRs, Google,
Oh
all
my
that stuff.
gosh.
There was none of that, right? What we're doing now
No. No.
was they said was impossible to have streaming video and have a conversation.
Impossible. TV on the wall? Are you kidding me?
And then you might remember there was no remote controls. I was my father's remote control. Hey
Yeah.
boy, get in here, turn to channel 9. The Mets is on. Okay, right? So
Hey, let me show you something. I'm in a room that has a prop. I want to show you the prop here real quick. I'm going to run up in here. You're going to love this.
that's almost the exact same thing I had, but the outside was plastic, right?
Oh, it's
And then,
plastic. Yeah.
okay, there you go. There you go. There you go. And the
Oh my
antenna
gosh, I
folds in
saw
the
this.
back. Yeah.
Yes.
And you had to get it just right to get the right station.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And you had the screws on the back.
This has a little tape on it. We had the foil on there. Oh my
That's
God.
right.
And this is what the whole family watched. It wasn't like, I'm holding it right here, but your whole family gathered around to see. Oh.
So
Yeah.
you remember that big TVs? There was like a cabinet, had a record player in the top.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
So
The
I tell
projection
people,
TV.
man, you
Oh
don't
God.
know how lucky you are, right? My house is voice activated. We got Alexa everywhere, right? And you know, a talking computer back in the days. The only time I saw stuff like that, I watched Star Trek when I was a kid. The flip phones, and they could talk and ask questions. And remember the little sticks that Spock used to put in the thing with the memory and all that stuff, right? And that came to fruition later on. And then another thing bothers me: a lot of black inventors, and I'm kind of switching channels here. A lot of black inventors, right? We don't have any what's the word, visibility, right? Because school teaches his story, not our history. But like the 3D movies and elevators and all that stuff the black people invented, we don't know about that. So we still have that negative mindset, right? We still have that we're not worthy, right? But as you learn, excuse me, as you learn what black people have done and invented, you then you can understand that you can do it good too. I remember when Barack Obama got elected, and I'm sorry my grandfather died before he got elected, right? I can only imagine how many young black men and women were inspired by his
Oh
story.
gosh. Yeah. And not just to be president, just inspired to be able to do things in life that are above what we believe that was even possible.
Exactly. Right. I went to a district governor conference for the Rotary Club. And again, it was maybe one or two black men in the room. Right. And well, there was no black women there. It was just us and a bunch of people that had money and influence and everything else. So I got invited out to a few lunches. Now the whole focus of this forum was to talk about increasing membership and activities and all that stuff. So I hit them with three acronyms, right? I'm sorry for my New York slang when I say hit them. I told them about three things that I had on my mind. P, right? Presence, education, and advertising, right? And I said that's how we'll get membership. And as I sit here and talk to you, I think that's also what we need in the black community, right? Black men need to be present, physically there, right? We need to educate each other, and we need to advertise our successes, right? And
you're so right. Yeah, you were so right. That's part of the Journey to Freedom program is how do we do that? How do we make sure that we're present? By learning about the past, and I'm going to take some men down to Alabama here in January. We're going to do a civil rights tour to find out. There's so many, especially some of our younger, in their late 20s and their 30s who haven't been part of it. I mean, it wasn't, they didn't even see a march on TV, none of that stuff, and then, like you said, how do we see where we were, and then how do we begin to move forward, based on being present, based on, so doing the things that you've just outlined, important that we provide a pathway for us to make sure that happens.
So I would like to, I'd like to mimic some of these conventions and conferences I've been in with people that don't have the money to stay in hotels or whatever. I think if you just had 2 or 3 days, right? During the day you have classes, right? Maybe 2 days of classes, financial, how to buy real estate, what avenues are out there for you to succeed. During lunch breaks or whatever, you could talk, have one-on-one conversations. And the night after dinner, there was a giant, I don't really drink, but they had a giant bar when we went to the Hilton in Atlanta, Signia, whatever. I think Signia by Hilton or whatever it is. They had a giant bar and watching the game. They had all of these screens, everything. So we're sitting there talking and drinking, right? And eating chicken wings, whatever. We're just chopping up. Man, what insightful conversations we got into from one subject to the next. Educational and entertaining, right? It wasn't until I joined the military or college, you went to college, that I had conversations that were semi-productive. So always used to talk about what music's out, what hip hop's going on, what sports is happening, who's in jail. Those things are irrelevant to success, right?
Those are the barbershop times, right?
Yeah, need to buy, especially in the barbershop, buying stocks, buying real estate, and how can we work together like other ethnic groups, right? Mexicans, right? One Mexican can call another Mexican and get whatever you need. The same thing with Jewish people. I grew up in the Italian area. Staten Island's a lot of Italians, right? So Italian dentist could tell you to go to Italian orthodontist, right? Jewish too, right? Oh, let's go to this Italian restaurant, right? We don't have that community structure, right? And I think that feeds into the mentality too, right? If we had our own stores, our own shops, and all of that kind of stuff, right? We'd be way better off, right? Of course, we have systematic racism and things that hold us back too.
Yeah. Well, you see, we kind of did some of that stuff. Like you think of Tulsa, was a whole ecosystem around Black businesses, and they didn't want to leave us alone in that time. And then they burned down the city and did it. But that doesn't mean we stopped trying. That's where you go,
exactly.
Oh, so is we got to keep moving forward. We can't just say, okay, because it happened, we quit. We have to continue to move forward. And I think we're starting to do a lot more as people are getting more educated and people are seeing that there is a better life that can happen out there. But there's just so many of us that have almost given up. And, that's why we're having conversations like this. And we're talking about this because we're saying it does not have to be like this. Does not have to be like this.
Right. So take somebody who, like, for instance, there was a guy around here. I took him to the gym with me because we just go down there to Planet Fitness. I could bring a guest. Man, we went and worked out. We had a great conversation, and I think we connected, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, as Black men or as Black people, right, we need to spend more quality time together, right? Instead of arguing and doing things productive, right? Listening to each other and feeding off each other's energy, right? Hey, because I have a lot of people, hey, let's do this, let's do that. Some serious, some not, right? And I try to take everybody serious. But when I find somebody I can rely on and we can work together, hey, man, the synergy's there, right? Come over the house. Let's get it done, right? I love that.
Yeah, well, that's so cool. Hey, so we're just about at time, and I don't know if there's things that you wanted to share with everybody that maybe we didn't get to talk to yet. Or we've covered so many really good stuff. We've talked about, identity and faith, and we've talked about, some trust. And what it takes, and I appreciate, what you've said in there. But is there anything else that you would love to make sure that maybe some more quotes or something like that you'd love us to have before we end our conversation today?
So there's, I believe it's an African saying, right? It says, if there is no wind, then row. They're referring to a boat. If you're not getting that free ride off the wind, you got to put your oars in the water and row. Yeah. So if we want to be successful, we have to reach out to other people, join networking organizations. We have to have conversations like this. Very impactful. But I want to thank you for having me on today. I enjoyed the conversation. Anytime you want to talk to me, all you got to do is pick up the phone, hit me on Zoom, whatever. And we can work.
We're definitely not done. What I'd love to do, maybe we can figure out, we can put a panel together of people and experts in certain area and just pick their brains about something. Maybe pick a subject and say, okay, hey, if like you talked about RITs, right? And I would love to have a conversation about, investment trust, because, the more that we can learn and understand. And it's one thing where we have somebody who is talking to us that we might not identify with. But if we have a group of people that have made money and done stuff that look like us and say, this is what I did. There's so many things that I find with the dynamic between whites and Black, because I think, it's a part of a conversation at a dinner table, for some of the suburban families that I grew up with, that I know about, what do you mean you don't know what RIT is? We talked about that when I was 7 years old, right. But they're not sharing it in our community. They're not coming to our dinner table and sharing it, and if we don't know it. So I think if we can figure out a way to make sure that we're having some more of these conversations where we get to talk about some of these amazing things that we have been able to do, but then duplicate it. Because I think that's where we get lost, is one person will do it and then become what we call the outlier. So, okay, now we get to look at them and go, okay, that guy's great. He's done this, but I don't know how he did it, or I don't even know what he does. I just know he shows up into the neighborhood with his BMW or his Mercedes or whatever it is, and we know he's not a drug dealer. We know he's doing something over on Wall Street. But how do we duplicate that where over and over and over and over that it's just part of what we do as a community? So, and I know you're working on that, you're doing that, and I thank you for, just feeding into people and taking, I think that's where we achieve, is when we decide, hey, I've done this in my lifetime. It's not time to just sit down and get on a sailboat. It's time to row. You brought that. It was time to row with the next generation and teach them how to do it. So for those of you who have been watching, thank you. Go ahead and subscribe. Go ahead and hit the notification button, whatever you have to do. Another one of these great conversations that we have, and I hope you're able to just glean, take what is necessary for you, because every single one of these conversations meets a different need for a different person. And we want to make sure that, because not all of us are the same, and not all of us, learn the same way. Not all of us get stuff out of what somebody else has done. And so with these opportunities for you to grow. So go ahead and make sure that you subscribe and that you're watching these. And so looking forward to talking to each of you on the next one that we do. Don't forget, you are God's greatest gift, and he loves you if you allow him to. We will talk to you on the next one. Thank you again, James. It's been just amazing.
My pleasure.
Right.